What's up guys, Lon here from Android Authority, and there's a lot of really great affordable smartphones on the market right now, and it's pretty amazing what you can get for just a couple $100. And right here in front of me are probably 3 of the best budget-friendly smartphones that you can get on the market right now, but how do they compare to one another? Let's find out with the Honor 5X, the Nexus 5X, and the OnePlus X. So we're gonna kick this off starting with the Honor 5X, which was just announced and released a few weeks ago at CES 2016, and this phone comes in at a price of just $200, but if you were to look at this phone without knowing anything about it, it doesn't necessarily strike you as a $200 smartphone. It's got an all-metal unibody design, which gives it a very high-end and solid feel in the hand, and the aluminum backside features a brushed hairline finish, which really tops off the overall looks of this device. The back is slightly curved with sides that are flat, make the phone very comfortable to hold, and for a phone that is made almost entirely of metal, it's surprisingly light in the hand and doesn't feel all that slippery. Something that you don't really see too often on a device this inexpensive is the inclusion of a fingerprint scanner, but Huawei was able to squeeze in this feature into the Honor 5X, and it works surprisingly well. It's not the fastest fingerprint scanner Huawei has put on a smartphone, but it's plenty fast and accurate enough that you're not going to have any problems with it. The Nexus 5X is a complete polar opposite in terms of build materials and how it feels in the hand. The 5X continues where the original Nexus 5 left off with an all-plastic design and a smooth matte finish all around. It definitely doesn't compare to the look and feel of a phone made of glass or metal, but the plastic build is actually quite sturdy. The matte finish has a soft feel to it, making it very comfortable to hold, and due to the overall size of the device, the 5X is really easy to operate in one hand. Just like the Honor 5X, the Nexus 5X also has a fingerprint scanner on the back, and it's one of 2 Nexus devices currently to include this feature. Google really nailed it with Nexus Imprint. The setup process only takes a few taps to register a fingerprint before you're up and running, and the fingerprint scanner itself is extremely fast. It's very reliable and accurate, and you can pretty much have your device unlocked before you even completely pull it out of your pocket. You're also getting USB Type-C with the Nexus 5X, which is slowly but surely becoming the new standard, whereas the Honor 5X and OnePlus X are still utilizing the older micro USB. OnePlus's flagship, the OnePlus 2, is already a very affordable smartphone, but they have an even more affordable phone with the OnePlus X. Despite its inexpensive price tag, OnePlus has managed to deliver a very high quality experience with the OnePlus X. It's smaller than the Nexus 5X, so it's even easier to use in one hand, and it's constructed with some really nice materials. It's a sandwich design with glass on the front and back, and a metal frame in between to hold it all together. The glass is very prone to fingerprints, but if you have the white version, it's not quite as noticeable. Usually phones with a lot of glass tend to be very slippery, but the metal frame has a series of microcuts built in that allows you to grip onto the phone without it sliding out of your hands. Unlike the Honor 5X and the Nexus 5X, the OnePlus X doesn't have a fingerprint scanner, but one feature that it does have is the physical alert slider, which is carried over from the OnePlus 2. You can allow all notifications, priority notifications, or completely silence the device at a flip of a switch. It's not a feature you see on very many Android devices, but considering how useful it is, it definitely should be. All 3 of these devices are rocking 1080p resolution displays, but the screen sizes and display technology is going to vary depending on which device you're looking at. With the Honor 5X, you've got a 5.5-inch IPS LCD display, which is the biggest display out of the bunch, so if you like large screen sizes, the Honor 5X may be the way to go. It's got really nice vibrant colors and very accurate looking whites. You're not going to get very deep blacks with this display, but it gets the job done in most aspects and is a pretty enjoyable display for your multimedia experience. The Nexus 5X's screen is a tad smaller at 5.2 inches, and it's an LCD display just like the Honor 5X, but the colors aren't quite as vibrant, it's definitely not as bright of a screen, and the whites are a little pink in comparison. It's still a decent looking panel, and if it's the only screen you're looking at, you won't have too much of a problem with it, but just know that it's not the best 1080p panel on the market. The OnePlus X has an AMOLED display, and it's personally my favorite out of the bunch because you're getting those really vibrant colors that pop out at you, solid viewing angles, and those deep inky blacks that you can't get from an LCD. It is a much smaller screen at 5 inches, which may be too small for some, but if you prefer smaller displays for things like better one-handed usability, then the OnePlus X's display should suit your taste just fine. Inside, you're going to find a Snapdragon processor powering all of these devices. The Honor 5X is running on a Snapdragon 615 with 2 gigs of RAM, the Nexus 5X has a Snapdragon 808 also with 2 gigs of RAM, and then you have the OnePlus X, which packs 3 gigs of RAM. It is, however, running on a much older older, more dated processor with the Snapdragon 801, but the 801 is still proving itself to be a very capable processor, which is why OnePlus decided to go with it. When it comes to performance, none of these devices are really going to blow you away in terms of their raw processing power or benchmarks, but they're not really meant to. These are budget devices after all, so that's something you always have to take into consideration, but all of these phones perform perfectly fine in regular everyday use. You will notice some stutter or slowdown if you try to push any of these devices too hard with intense multitasking, but most games, including the more graphically demanding ones, run pretty well for the most part, and overall I haven't noticed too much of a real-world performance difference between these three devices. If you're concerned about NFC, well, the Nexus 5X is the only one that carries it, but if you're more concerned about storage, then the Honor 5X and the OnePlus X are the better options, as both of these devices have expandable storage, whereas the Nexus 5X does not. That shouldn't, however, come as much of a surprise though, because it's been this way with Nexus devices for several years now. Something that's also missing from the Honor 5X and the OnePlus X is full US LTE band support, more so in the OnePlus X's case, which is missing both band 12 and band 17 on a hardware level. Now this doesn't mean that you won't get US LTE data speeds, but without band 12 or band 17, it may not be as reliable or as consistent as you may like. Now as far as battery life goes, I wouldn't expect anything more than a full day's worth of battery out of any of these devices, but the way they go about achieving that are all very different. The Honor 5X relies on a large 3000 mAh battery to give itself enough juice to get you through the day. There are, however, Huawei standard power saving features built in that adjust CPU and network usage for longer battery life, including an ultra power saving mode that disables most things except for basic functions like calls and messaging. This of course can be really useful in those times when you just can't get to a charger and you just need to stretch out those last few percentages for as long as possible. With the Nexus 5X, you're getting a slightly smaller 2700 mAh battery, and battery life during normal usage is pretty good, but where the 5X really shines is in standby. This is due to Doze, one of the newest features of Android Marshmallow, which puts the phone in a deep sleep and limits unnecessary app activity anytime the phone is idle for a long time. It makes a huge difference, and you can really see how little power is being consumed when looking at the battery life statistics. Something else that the Nexus 5X has is fast charging technology, which neither the Honor 5X or the OnePlus X have, and this can be problematic if you've grown accustomed to fast charging, but you can't expect to win them all when you're dealing with sub $300 smartphones. The OnePlus X has the smallest battery out of the bunch at 2525 mAh, but the smaller 5-inch AMOLED panel is much more battery friendly compared to an LCD, and the OnePlus X comes with a system-wide dark mode enabled by default to help you get the most out of your battery life. On paper, these cameras sound pretty close to one another when looking at the raw numbers. You've got a 13 megapixel camera on the Honor 5X, 12 megapixels on the Nexus 5X, and 13 on the OnePlus X, but we all know that megapixels aren't everything, and things like the actual quality of the sensor, pixel size, and image processing make all the difference in the world. When comparing the quality of the images side by side, it's really not much of a competition here. The Nexus 5X easily beats out the Honor 5X and the OnePlus X, which probably won't be too surprising to many people considering it's the same exact sensor and image processing as the Nexus 6P. In normal to good lighting conditions, the 5X produces consistently sharper images with better dynamic range and color accuracy. The OnePlus X is sort of in the middle. The colors are decent and there's a good amount of detail. Dynamic range is still lacking, but it's nowhere near as bad as the Honor 5X, which is in a very distant third. You're getting a lot of overexposed highlights and crushed shadows, and many of the images on the Honor 5X have a noticeably warm cast. In low light, the story is pretty much the same. The Nexus 5X does really well in low light. The images are well detailed, there's very little noise, and the highlights aren't overexposed like what you would get on the OnePlus X or Honor 5X. The Honor 5X is also quite slow in low light, and images can come out slightly blurry if you don't have a perfectly steady hand. The camera tries to add some extra sharpening to the images in post to bring out more detail, but the photos are very muddy and soft as is that it doesn't make much of a difference. These are all Android devices obviously, but like many other Android devices out there, the software experience is going to vary depending on which one you pick. The Honor 5X is running on Android Lollipop currently with Huawei's Emotion UI, which is far from the best Android skin out there, and if you think it looks a lot like iOS, you're not the only one. It's filled with a lot of very colorful icons, wallpapers, and transparency effects, and the interface also lacks an app drawer. Thankfully, this is Android, so you can get a more standard Android experience by installing a third-party launcher. Emotion UI does sprinkle in a few nice software tweaks here and there, but for the most part, it feels like it's just interfering with the core Android experience more than it adds to it. If you want the purest of the pure, Nexus has always been the best way to go. With the Nexus 5X, not only are you getting the latest Android Marshmallow and all the great features that come with it, like Doze, Now on Tap, and user-defined app permissions, stuff that we've talked about in length in other videos, but you're also always going to be the first in line for updates. Stock Android is generally much faster and more responsive over their skinned counterparts as well, so if you care about a smooth, streamlined, and clean user interface, stock Android is going to be your best bet. If you're a fan of the stock look and feel but prefer just a little bit more options and customization, then the OnePlus X offers exactly that. The OnePlus X runs on what OnePlus calls Oxygen OS, which is pretty heavily based on stock Android, but you'll notice that there's a lot more features built in that you simply just can't get with stock. Along with the system-wide dark mode that I mentioned earlier, you also have custom UI accent colors, various gesture controls like double tap to wake, drawing an O to open up the camera, or a V to toggle on the flash, and you even have custom app permissions despite the OnePlus X being on Lollipop. One of the biggest features of Oxygen OS is called Shelf, which is a pane that lives on the left of your main home screen that stores your frequently used apps, contacts, and any widgets of your choice to make it easier to stay organized and keep your home screens a little bit less cluttered. The biggest downside of this not being pure stock Android is the amount of bloatware that comes pre-installed on the OnePlus X. You've got everything from speed boosters, junk file cleaners, and a plethora of other applications that produce notifications that can't easily be swiped away. When it comes to deciding which one is best for you, you'll have to ask yourself what aspects of a smartphone are really important. Is it the build quality, the camera, a fingerprint sensor, etc.? If you want a metal build with a large 5.5-inch screen and a fingerprint sensor, go with the Honor 5X. If you want a fantastic camera, stock Android, and a fingerprint sensor, the Nexus 5X is easily the best option. For those of you who want a sleek metal and glass design with a software experience that offers a little more than what you can get with stock Android, the OnePlus X is a solid smartphone from OnePlus. With sub $300 price points, you can't expect these phones to do everything perfectly, so shortcomings are to be expected, but if you can live with those, you'll be perfectly happy with your purchase, whichever device you decide to go with. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you did enjoy it, please give it a thumbs up down below. We definitely appreciate it. And also subscribe to the channel, which is also down below if you haven't already. And check out the videos over here if you want to see more here from us at Android Authority. And check out the website as well for more in-depth coverage, because we are your source for all things Android.